It's now time for our final session, the panel discussion, and it will be chaired by Professor Hans Karlsson from Uppsala University. He's a professor of scientific computing and a former director of the Swedish National HPC Center, and also the Uppsala University representative and General Assembly of EOSC. And hopefully we will have an interesting discussion with all our speakers. So please, Hans, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I would say if the rest of you have questions, you can put them in the chat so we can bring them up. But I think the main discussion is supposed to be between the speakers. And I think Sarah Jones has left for other issues now. So we have the Sally Chambers, Björn Nystedt, Regine Stein, or Inge van Norberg here this discussion. I think EOSC now is sort of getting in place. It's forming, and we are now sort of forming the collaboration, and we're looking forward to it. But we also need to make it happen, right? We have all the incitements, we have all the starting issues, but we have not really settled it. So first question is sort of, how can we make sure it's get used? So what are the main benefits of the EOSC from the user perspective and the provider perspective? And also, is the user always a researcher? Do we envision companies and ordinary people to join EOSC and use it, or is it just for researchers? So who wants to start? Yeah, we need help, Regina, to start the video. The moderator. She's up already now. So Sally.
Maybe I will start, if I may.
Yeah.
So EOSC, well, at first, I will already be very happy if researchers can make use of EOSC the way that it makes them happy and that they can find a lot of interesting services, data, and etc. in one place. We don't expect that all researchers will use EOSC as their primary source for information. Sarah could elaborate on that. Of course, many researchers will still first go to their own research infrastructure to find tools and information out there, but we see more and more interdisciplinary work going on. And then you're not so that familiar with these other research infrastructures and how do they work, etc. So it's then EOSC should be an answer there. So that is where you can find interconnected, interdisciplinary information, and that is where you can use it. But in the end, EOSC should also be usable, interesting outside the research community. Not all of it, probably, because it's not always so easy for the outside the research community, but in the end, SMEs, etc., will also be an end user of EOSC. And that is what I always hear about EOSC, and that's my interpretation. Maybe my colleagues want to add something more to that. I have another view.
Thank you. So, who's next, Björn?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think what is important, though, I think, is that from a user perspective, also that it is actually having the ambition to make things so globally findable, in the sense that what we see is an increasing challenge to know if your data, so to say, has already been produced. So we are sometimes meeting research projects trying to produce data that turns out to be already out there. And this is an interesting aspect, I think. And we need to sort of avoid regenerating the same things over and over again. And having that ambition, I think, is an important angle from the EOSC side. And we will see more and more research projects operating on existing data. In the life sciences, traditionally, you have generated your own data, so to say, and you've worked on that part. But we, of course, see more and more combinations always with existing data, but also projects that will only operate on existing data.
Sally?
Yeah, maybe I could add a couple of things. I think the research, getting researchers to use EOSC is going to be, for the first few years, the largest challenge. I like what Inga said about researchers using the environments they're comfortable with. And I think that is one of the things that we're doing within EOSC Future at the moment, is to try and make the interaction between the domain-specific environments and the EOSC as smooth transition as possible, so that people already feel comfortable with the environments they're in, and then they can sort of see what else is out there as well. Absolutely agree on the interdisciplinarity. I would love to see it. So, for example, Elixir in Belgium is very active, and they've got these Galaxy tools about networking and interconnecting workflows and pipelines. And I would love, for example, to see if these tools could be reapplied to the humanities, because they've been going for ages in the life sciences, and look at the application. And just about industry, I mean, what some work we've been doing is like small and medium enterprises who provide specific and open access tools and services, but they can have their business models. So I think innovative business models are very interesting. Regarding, for example, can universities or researchers have paid for support to use particular tools and services, but the tools and services are, for example, open source available. So I think this is part of the innovation side of the EOSC, moving from sort of startups towards innovation as well. So maybe some ideas there.
Regina, do you want to add something?
Yeah, thank you. Almost everything said, of course, and I totally agree. I think that, well, really one benefit that should not be underestimated is that we get into a discussion with each other, even without having users, let's say, or being in some kind. We are ourselves, of course, all users, also those who are building research infrastructures and who are building research infrastructures for specific communities. I think do learn a lot from this interaction between the various actors in EOSC, and this is in terms of getting into interdisciplinary discussions and getting a deeper understanding of each other's requirements. This is, from my point of view, a quite important benefit as well.
Thank you. So now we're talking about the European Open Science Cloud. So we will open up also for the rest of the world, right? For the US, for China, from India, etc. Do we expect those countries to do the same, that is, open up the data in the same way as we open up for them? Or do you feel there will be an unbalance between the effort in Europe and with the rest of the world? Any thoughts about that? Yeah, Sally.
Yeah, maybe I could start on that. I mean, we're very lucky, and I'm now speaking with my DARIA hat on. We did a series of workshops called DARIA Beyond Europe, where we initially started out with reaching out to colleagues in the US and in Australia. And for example, the colleagues in Australia are very active in RDA, and the colleagues in we've already had, since we did these workshops, had some colleagues joining from the US into the DARIA network as cooperating partners. So I feel that research doesn't stop at the European borders, and that we need to really collaborate globally. However, some of the challenges, for example, related to rights, GDPR, and things like this, they have international implications that we need to consider. So I think from a research perspective, yes, globally, but there are some practical, I mean, we can all do IIIF and various different standards, but the cross-border sharing of data will have legal and maybe even ethical challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we talk about open data, open publications, etc., in EOSC, but also more closed data. It's a spectrum of sharing, of course. But when we talk about open data, this is a global movement. Open science is a global movement. And if we look at activities within Open Air, we connect to Latin America. We have collaborations with Canada. Indeed, Australia is very active as well. Some countries in Asia, like for example, Japan. So there are quite some collaborations going on there. And then the most easy part is, of course, the open data. So that when you have less problems with all kinds of rights like GDPR, I mean, it's open data, but the expectation is indeed that it's a global thing, and that everywhere you have open data. The question is which data will be opened, and if you look at the spectrum of sharing from one-to-one to very open to everyone in the world without restrictions, there are quite some other ways of sharing, and there could be the question what will be shared with others and what not. But when you talk about open data, it's a global thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to agree with that, as you're saying, and but also that I don't really see you play it out a little bit as a risk scenario here, Hans, and I don't really see that. I see that the competence we build up by building this one, and if we do it in the sense that we also build on top of it all these ecosystems. If we only look at data strictly, then it has limited value, I think. But if you build the whole ecosystem of competence and knowledge build up around that, then I think this is how we will build scientific knowledge in Europe then. So I don't think there is sort of a risk at being good at that. I think that is something that will be in our favor for sure.
Yeah.
Thinking of our users, actually, in the context of the NFDI, we have a lot this discussion as well. Many of the communities are already highly internationally connected and have their international research infrastructures. So I think there is even no choice at that point. We need to be international clearly, and to support these interactions and this connectivity already existing in many communities. So I would also agree there, well, even not only there is no risk, there is also, I think, no other choice.
Thank you. Good answers to the question. I think, and I agree with you. Maybe I posted a little bit too negative, but I also see that the users are building sort of a community and taking the lead in this process. I think that's will be beneficial for European research. In your talks, you already touched upon my next question about how we can provide skills and training for the user, because now we must make the researchers make use of the resources. They might get access to the data, they might do the analysis. So how can we sort of continue using what you're already sort of building up within ELIXIR, within Open Air, etc., about training and etc. So what kind of skills and training do we need within EOSC, and how can we provide them? And thinking sustainability for a long period of time and working on the European level. Yeah, Inge.
Training and support will be hugely important because for many researchers, there's quite some new stuff coming up. When we talk about fair data, for many researchers, this is a new concept. What do they mean? What do we mean with that? How can they achieve that? Which are the tools and services that they can use? So we certainly have to get this within training on several levels, from the bachelor curriculum to the senior researcher. So there's quite a challenge ahead. And I think something like the community of practice of training coordinators will play a role there, because there we have all these training coordinators from different infrastructures, let's say, to work together. That's one thing. But another thing will be, how can we really embed it within education? because it's not only for research that fair data is important. In industry, it will have an impact as well, because how much data is comes out of industry, for example, even if they just share it internally, also their fair data will be an important factor to take into account for sustainability reasons, but for many reasons. And that is where also the importance of, for example, a data steward comes in. For example, here in Flanders, we have a network of data stewards, a knowledge hub of the Flemish Research Data Network, where we train, exchange best practices, but also the government supports this network, so that in every research organization there are data stewards available to help train the trainers and to get this across. So this investment is certainly important, but needed. So, and we are happy that at least in Flanders we can do this partly through funding of the Flemish government.
Sorry.
Yes, I think it goes back to the domain-specific research infrastructure. So, for example, we've got the SSH Open Marketplace will include the training materials that will also be ingested into EOSC. We have Daria Campus, which is meant to be about open educational resources. And I think for research infrastructures in particular, this outreach work, and I agree absolutely with what Inga said about the students, really from sort of bachelor level and even maybe before that, but let's start with bachelor level onwards, being able to introduce these EOSC and related training into the everyday curriculum. So at Ghent University, we have something called digital literacy pathways in the educational, in the arts and humanities in particular, where it's the digital literacy component is sort of fed into, whether you're doing history, literature, art history, it's incorporated into the domain specific. And I think if we can start getting students at an early age comfortable with open science, the EOSC, digital resources, research data, I think that will really help.
Yeah, Regina?
One aspect I would like to add to what Inge said about the data stewards, also that is already a quite known and more established concept, and we have now started talking about service stewards as well, because we think, yeah, the adoption of the various services, of course, also needs very specific knowledge in quite often, and it's this kind of human interface between the infrastructure and the users that is most often not available for the users, and that yeah, leaves infrastructure offers unused, just because it is very hard to get into the infrastructure, and it's somehow the same balance that needs to be found, that we on one hand there should no training be necessary to use EOSC offers or other research infrastructures offers in the first place. But at the same time, it is very important that the support and training is available if I really want to go into depth with some of these offerings.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I said in my talk also, I think training is crucially important, of course, and you talked about the sustainability, and I think one thing that we see here is really that the demand for training is so large that it's unreasonable to put it only on the sort of PIs and the researchers. and that the research infrastructures need to take a large role in this to make it sustainable, because as a PI you're not really valued for your contribution to training in the same sense as you might be as a staff scientist. Which brings us to staff scientists, because what we're really saying here also is that what we see is that for the digital research infrastructure, I think staff will be crucial. And that goes back to the data stewards and the service stewards and whatever that we are talking about, I mean, data a lot, but really it will be staff that is a crucial component. And to have the competence of that staff and to have the career paths of that staff, I mean, that will be a key step here.
Yeah, question from, just let Eva Paul for a short comment, please.
I'd like to comment on Björn's, what Björn raised just now. Is it sufficient that staff of the research infrastructure is provided? Is it not also required that we let these skills be tackled in actual training of our researchers, even before they get to the research stage, if you want to call it that? No, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. There is no limit, so to say, to what we can do. In Sweden, we are at the Sign-Up Lab, and we're kind of establishing a nationwide training hub now to really try to look at all the aspects of training. I mean, we as a sort of the bioinformatics infrastructure has had some aspects of the training under our umbrella, if you like, but we're trying now to make this sort of like national, and then through Elixir European at least scale. But I can see this at all levels, basically.
A comment here is that within EuroHPC there's been a call about training and building up a European university education for not data stewards, but then for in terms of HPC competent personnel training, education, etc. And of course, here we also ask for the Commission could play a role in terms of enabling funding for training data stewards and building a networking between the different countries. So this also leads to the next question, coupled to this, and we talked before. So as we said, EOSC is forming. We have a tripartite set up in terms of funding and organization. And so what's the next big challenge for EOSC from your perspective? What is the next big challenge that we need to meet and overcome to make it happen? Yeah, Sally.
For me, it's the data. I think it's great that we're sort of starting to integrate the services with the different research infrastructures, but we really need to get access to the data and this collections as data in the cultural heritage domain, particularly for the full text of resources for those in copyright, sort of like 21st century born digital web archives. I think this remains a huge challenge. But I think all the building blocks are in place. So I think it's just a question of time. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but I think if we sort of start taking concrete steps so that the EOSC really becomes something practical that people can understand in their day-to-day lives. I'm preparing a presentation for this afternoon about the challenges of researchers using libraries, for example, and the reduction of time that is available for research is a very significant challenge. So if we can make it easier and integrate particularly the research data at more or less one touch of a button, I think this will really help things.
Yeah.
So we still have quite a challenge ahead on interoperability, so within research infrastructures, I think already quite a lot is linked. But once you want to get out of the research infrastructure and link different infrastructures and data, interoperability issues comes up, and I think there's still quite some work to do there. It's feasible, but it will take some time. So by the time that you can really have this interlinked web of data, of fair data, it will take some time, but it will come. But researchers need to see the positive side of that, and that is the second challenge. That is really that we do a lot to get researchers interested in what EOSC is and what they can take out of it. And as Sally says, it would be very good to have like 1 or 2 buttons that you can click and that the information is at hand. So that is quite a challenge as well. The third one, we are engaged in a local project here in Belgium, FAIR GNSS, where ROB, the Royal Observatory Belgium, is looking at making GNSS data fair and the stations that they work with. And it is a really practical way of seeing where are the problems, the challenges mainly, of getting data that's already out there to make it interoperable, to make it fair, and to be connected to EOSC. And we need more projects like this, I guess, like also we do in EOSC Future with this data in action. Really examples, how do you practically do that, connect your infrastructure and to make it interoperable and fair. So that's quite a challenge as well.
Yeah.
I think you touched on it before yourself, Hans, actually. As I see it, I think sustainability is really key here. In the life sciences, at least, I mean, there are a lot of things ongoing and has been for a long time. And I see a slight risk here that EOSC is becoming just one more thing on top of everything else. If it really has the ambition to make a difference, I think sustainability will be key, and that it's gonna really connect the things that are on, sort of out there now, but do it in a sustainable way. So framework and funding way. If it's just a project, it's one of many projects.
Very true. I would like to reinforce and to add that I think we are saying it has to become easier. It has to become easy to submit data sets, to submit also services. And I think we will probably need also kind of policy for each of the science clusters on how to do that, because there are differences, and we are back at the question of interoperability. I think this is really a task and a challenge for the research infrastructures as a network, and how it will work on the different layers then towards EOSC and beyond. Because why should I submit data to my NFDI consortium in Germany, and then again to EOSC, and then again to somewhere else? This is certainly something that needs to be interconnected.
Yeah, thank you, and that's perfect, because that leads now to my next and final question. So we're now setting a stage in terms of policies and discussions how we can collaborate, but in the end we must store the data somewhere, and we must be able to analyze it. And the researchers do not want to store the data in many different places and not move data between different places, and it could also be quite costly and so. So how can we set up a federated research infrastructure in terms of hardware, storage, analysis that we will make the researcher use? And also for ELIXIR, you already have international collaboration, you're sharing data in different ways, so maybe you can start later on. But also, so how can we do it work? And how can we there? And what is HPC? Because if I talk to a higher engineer physicist or a computational chemist, it might be different than if we talk to a linguist. So what kind of HPC resource do you need? And do we need one HPC center in Europe, or do we need 10, 15, 100? So could you elaborate a little bit what you think about how to set up? And Björn, could you start with your ELIXIR experience in working with data with different countries?
I can do. I mean, there is a lot of important things in EOSC, of course, and I agree with you, Hans. This shared data access and shared computing is one of the central ones, and ELIXIR has worked on this for some time, and it has taken longer than we anticipated in the beginning. a lot of, I think we have underestimated the legal issues. So maybe we should have employed lawyers more than bioinformaticians, if you like. But it is coming in place, and it is what is still lacking is the authentication. Actually, I think this is, if you look at the sort of really next practical step, I think what the single authentication across Europe, so to say, is a really, would be a real sort of milestone if we can get there.
Thank you.
And I could add also, it's hard. We do not really see that having one single place is the best sort of solution. We see more federated solutions as the way forward, also because competence is always kind of centered around these centers. I mean, you can think that it's just a sort of computer, but it's also the whole competence thing that is sort of surrounding. And that competence, I think, is really beneficial to have sort of federated and distributed in Europe, and not only at the single place.
Good, thank you. I do agree with that. So, Sally, what's your point? Think about it.
Yes, I was just trying to think about it, and I want to follow up what Björn said a little bit. I was thinking about competency centers. So, for example, if we had a HP center, or a HP, it doesn't have to be, it could be a virtual center related to analysis of digital cultural heritage, for example. So I think it could be a way of going towards the particular center. So for example, if we're talking about optical character recognition and it's about the sharing of different algorithms, maybe sharing resulting research data that comes out of that to make it reusable in a certain domain. However, I still think the cross-border sharing of data is going to be a challenge in our domain for several years yet. And maybe it's a case of, for want of a better term, lobbying, that within the EOSC it is possible to have research exceptions that can enable cross-border sharing of this kind of research data. So I think the European Commission has got a role as well to sort of, I mean, I would like the idea that we don't stop employing researchers in EOSC, but maybe we do need some more legal expertise, and the idea of this working group within EOSC about that would be very valuable as well.
Thank you. Regina, Inge, you want to comment or any thoughts about this?
May I pass my time to Ewald, because I think he raised his hand and I think he can say more than I can.
Yeah, Ewald.
Hi, sorry. Thanks for passing on the mic. I agree with Björn and Hans in the sense that as research is diverse, I think research infrastructures are also particularly messy. I think we shouldn't wait for the one solution to rule them all to merge before we go on and do stuff. I think what Björn said is completely correct. The better authentication within Europe would be a really big breakthrough, but I think we shouldn't wait for that to happen. As Hans, you asked the question, what is HPC? HPC is so broad. The field of scientific computing is so broad that it's impossible to tackle everything. So I think we should prepare, and also prepare our researchers to, be prepared that you will get your hands dirty and either store your data not in one place but in multiple places, and deal with it to the best of your abilities.
Yeah, thanks. So my reason for putting up is HPC is because we've listened to the EuroHPC engagement for Europe, which is mainly building the first exascale computer in Europe. That might be a good HPC system, but it might not be suitable for digital humanities, etc. So it's important, as I said, to find the different levels of analysis tools you need, and as you say, about store the data in different places and make it short. It will be fair. Okay, time is running out. Thank you for very good comments, and hand over to Birgit.